Bueno, y hacemos un pequeño paréntesis en la programación para hablar concretamente de los mercados financieros, adentrarnos un poco más en la gestión activa, también ver cuáles son las oportunidades de inversión, pero sobre todo enfocándonos en un mercado, en el mercado de renta variable japonesa. Lo vamos a hacer con Invesco porque tenemos aquí con nosotros a Yasuko Sato, que es Client Portfolio Manager del equipo de renta variable japonesa de Invesco en Tokio. Yasuko, thank you so much for being here in Negocios Televisión.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for the time too.
Thank you for being here. First of all, I wanted to ask you more about the general terms of the market. For example, many people believe that right now we're beginning to see the start of a new bull market. Do you have the same argument? Do you believe that we're seeing the start of a new bull market?
Yes, I think so, because at this moment, especially in Japan, Japan's economy is different cycle from compared to Europe and the US, because our reopening is just started. And also, we are hopeful that the stabilization of the inflationary environment, maybe Japan, Europe, and US, is giving some a bit more visibility, the central bank's route. So therefore, we think that, and in case of, in particular in Japan, somehow non-Japanese investors have been avoiding Japan, but we start the stabilization of the macroeconomic the environment, and if the bull market starts, it was to look into the Japanese equities.
Last week, you spoke about central banks. Last week, central banks like the Federal Reserve or the ECB started to sound a little bit more less hawkish, we could say. And Japan is a very special case inside the central banking world, because here in Japan we have a really accommodative stance and accommodative approach in regards to the central bank. What is your vision in the Japanese fixed income market, or also on the stock market in Japan, taking into account how the central bank is moving here?
Okay, so I would say that's that's a great question, because last December, Bank of Japan unexpectedly tweaked the monetary policy easing, because in case of Japan, not only the interest rate control, but also the government, central bank is control the yield curve of the bond, government bond yield curve. And last December, unexpectedly, the Bank of Japan tweaked the yield curve control, which came as a negative surprise for the stock market, and positive surprise like the Japanese yen. However, last monetary policy meeting in January, Bank of Japan now recommit the monetary policy easing measure, and even they are prepared for some special facilities to providing attractive interest rates to encourage the financial institutions to buy the JGB, the Japanese government bond. So in that context, at this moment, the Bank of Japan is reiterate their commitment to monetary policy easing, which could be different from the American or European central banks. And I think this is in line with what we saw in the inflationary environment, i.e., basically at this moment, inflation rate is 4%. Is the headline for inflation rate on 4% is very high. How in the Japan, but however it's lower than US and far lower than the Europe. And also, if we look at the components of the CPI, we haven't seen material increase in the services. So at this moment, most of the inflation coming from energy and food, without seeing the spillover effect in the wages and as well as services. So therefore, while the Bank of Japan's December tweak was surprised in terms of timing, however, the last monetary policy meeting decision in last week is in line with what we saw in the Japanese inflation environment.
Also, speaking of the Central Bank of Japan, Kuroda, its governor, is about to leave the job as governor of the central bank. Who do you believe should replace him, and should his successor have the same approach, the same accommodative approach as Kuroda had?
That's a great question. So it hasn't finalized yet, but a couple of days ago, the Japanese newspaper reported that the government now approached the whole dovish candidate, which currently work as a vice governor, work with the Kuroda. So therefore, I think that we expect significant changes in the monetary policy easing, which gives some stability or comfort to the investors, which is good. But it's really depends. But we also know it's unsustainable to continue current monetary negative interest rate combined yield curve control forever. So the next governor's important role is appropriately normalize the monetary policy easing, and therefore we are close attention to the inflation in services and wages, and it's subject. That's I think new governor should control change the monetary policy according to the inflationary environment in Japan.
Taking into account everything that you said, Yasuko, do you believe right now, for example, it's the time to invest in fixed income in Japan, knowing that the rates are really low?
Well, we expect still like volatilities, especially in the first half of this year, because it's rumored, but we haven't see who is the next governors yet. And also, as I explained, the Bank of Japan's monetary policy is subject to inflationary environment. We need to see a little bit more. So we expect still some volatilities or noises in the first half of this year in terms of the interest rate.
Also, I wanted to ask you about how people believe one should invest in Japan. Many believe that one of the best ways to do that is through ETFs, but we can also do it through active managers. Which one do you think is best?
Well, I'm active manager, so I'm always advocacy towards the active manager. But interestingly, active management in the US is very difficult, and also in Europe, basically, the active manager's performance is in line with the indices. But in case of Japan, because many people no longer look into Japan detail, but this gives a lot of stock picking opportunities to Japanese active managers. And therefore, if you look at the performance of the active manager in Japan, they tend to be median return is outperforming the benchmark. So therefore, if you look into the strategic allocation in Japan, it might be good. It might be interesting to see active managers' performance.
You just said that there's a lot of stock picking opportunities. Could you please say one example for us?
Okay. So because this is a very difficult time these days, but you can find an advantage. Invesco's flagship strategy is Invesco Japanese Equity Advantage Fund. And this portfolio tries to find out unique companies in a different sectors which has intangible value or brand quality, which can generate robust free cash flow. So one of the long-standing company in the portfolio is Itoen, the green tea specialist. And then they have a green tea brand, so-called Oi-Ocha, Hello Tea. And every single Japanese knows that brand name. And the company maintains 30% plus market share last 1 or 2 decades. And then those companies, you can find out, Japan is actually overlooked market, but we can find out such kind of very niche, unique Japanese companies. And in case of Itoen, now they are expanding their green tea brand, not only Japan, but also US and China. So you can find out very unique Japan quality companies in Japan.
Yasuko Sato, client portfolio manager at stock Japanese team in Invesco in Tokyo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Bueno, nos quedamos con algunos de los mensajes que nos ha trasladado Yasuko, entre ellos, por ejemplo, bueno, pues que desde luego que el Banco de Japón todavía tiene esa labor, ese reto de normalizar la política monetaria y va a ser uno de los retos a los que se va a enfrentar el sucesor de Kuroda como gobernador. También